Final Fantasy X is currently in another golden age when it comes to speedrunning, with a couple new records being set in the last few months in the any percent category on PS2. The most recent one of these was achieved by Tera with a time of 9 hours, 34 minutes, and 30 seconds. If you told one of these runners that just a couple years ago this time was possible, you might have been looked at like you were crazy. For a long time, getting under 10 hours in the PS2 version of FF10 was a fever dream, let alone a time like this. In September of 2011, Tera was the first to break the 10-hour barrier. It would be almost another 10 years before Tera did the same thing for the 9-hour barrier in June of 2021. This begs the question, what the hell happened to bring the record down by another 25 minutes? Today, let's briefly go over some of the strategies that Tera and others have used recently to push the FF10 any percent record into uncharted territory. Grab a glass of water, stay hydrated, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Now before we talk about this FF10 speedrun, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, RuneScape. Old School RuneScape is launching Leagues 5, Raging Echoes on November 27th, and it'll be live until January. Leagues are all about amping up the game with insane experience rates, massive loot drops, and relic power-ups that are completely game-breaking. In past leagues, these relics have had instant kill effects, unlimited special attacks, and ridiculous attack speed. If you're feeling up to the challenge, you can take on enhanced versions of the game's iconic bosses called Echo Bosses and get amazing rewards for beating them. You can even see your high scores in the league to see how you're stacking up against the competition. If you've been thinking about trying Old School RuneScape, there's a promotional league's membership package for new and returning players which covers the entire league, letting you blast your way through Raging Echoes without any long-term commitment. Hit the link in my description or pinned comment to find out more and download Old School RuneScape. It'll really help me out a ton. Thanks again to RuneScape for sponsoring this video. Now that I'm done being the spokesperson for my corporate masters, we need to look back at the year 2021, which was one of the most eventful in Final Fantasy X speedrunning history. It's no surprise that FF10 has a very linear speedrun, and for a long time, there was not opportunity for major skips or anything like that. So time save came in the form of getting minimal encounters, fast boss fights, and lucky drops. The general strategy for combat at the top level is to get more strength on Titus in the early game to maximize his damage, and then pump Yuna with the same stat leading up to obtaining Bahamut. This involves using teleport spheres to reach other parts of the sphere grid that have big strength nodes. Because Aeons scale off of Yuna's stats, they end up being massive powerhouses by the end of the game. Bahamut is a special case here as he automatically has the break damage capability in his kit, allowing him to carry the party through the rest of the run and defeating bosses in only a few hits. FF10 was very optimized as a result, and by the time 2021 came around, runners were scraping the bottom of the barrel for optimizations. For the last several years, if you wanted the FF10 any percent record, you had to bank on an encounter with a ghost in the Cavern of Stolen Faith and hope it dropped a no encounters armor. A ghost has a 1 in 13 chance of appearing where it was farmed, and there's a 5% chance of getting the armor drop to keep the run going. The worst thing about this was that the ghost encounter was just under 8 hours into a run, meaning you had to waste a little more time than it would take to watch the entire Star Wars prequel trilogy in one sitting. Around April of 2021, one community member named Rossi decided that runners shouldn't have to deal with this anymore, and that led to research into values that would lead to a guaranteed ghost encounter based on a global encounter table. To provide some context, for some time on the HD remaster version, runners would notice they get multiple runs with similar damage rolls and critical hits on Sin Spawn Ames, the first boss. This was the first indication that FF10's random number generator, or the thing that controls random values in the game, was based off of a set value that never changed throughout a playthrough. This is known as a seed, and it's set sometime after hitting the new game option in the main menu. Over the course of several months, Rossi would pick apart the game's code, finding out that the game uses a formula that includes the system clock and the amount of frames since the game was booted to generate a seed. For the PS2 version, there's a massive 2 to the 32 power amount of possible seeds. For the HD remaster, due to a bug in the formula that reads the frames since the game was booted, there's only 256 possible seeds. This, combined with an HD remaster seed spreadsheet created by Crimson Inferno 9 to track when you get a critical hit on the first boss, A tracker was eventually created to see what damage rolls would get you a ghost encounter and on what overall encounter number it would happen. Eventually, this would lead to Rossi finding out how all aspects of RNG worked in the game, and a runner named Grey Fox expanding on Crimson Inferno's spreadsheet to make a comprehensive seed tracker for both the PS2 and HD remaster versions of the game. In late fall of 2021, runners had the ability to manipulate many aspects of their run based on a few damage rolls at the beginning of the game. For the PS2 version, this would make a sub 10-hour time much more attainable. A runner by the name of Matayama took advantage of this by getting a new PS2 90% record with a time of 9 hours, 57 minutes, and 12 seconds. This changed FF10 speedrunning forever, ensuring that runners could get seeds with the no encounters armor and making the run more consistent at the top level. However, this is only one piece of the puzzle that brings us to where we're at today, since there's several skips runners use to save major chunks of time. Since January of 2013, it's been known that if you talk to NPCs at the same time you hit a cutscene trigger, you can interrupt that scene and maintain control of your character. Since most of the cutscenes are not skippable, this was an incredible find. Thanks to various community members such as Chubfish, Tera, and Tomo, several major skips were implemented into runs. The first one of these was Class Go Skip, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. Just before Mushroom Rock Road, there's a scene where Classco stops you and tells you where the command center is. If you talk to the running NPC that gives you 2 Phoenix Downs as you're hitting the Classco cutscene trigger, you can interrupt it and walk straight into the next area. Another huge skip was found in Makalani Temple. By talking to Tremel at the same time as you triggered the Shalinda cutscene, you can interrupt her text and move up the stairs to the Cloister of Trials, skipping the Jiskel Sphere scene. A way to skip talking to several NPCs in Guado Salam was discovered in March of 2013. By talking to a moving NPC in front of the shop in the right position and getting pushed by another NPC, you can trigger a cutscene with Kamari, which can be interrupted and used to pass the NPC blocking the way to Thunder Plains and skip the lightning dodge tutorial. Another skip was found in late 2014 called Mihin Skip. By talking to the NPC walking towards you who gives you a weapon, and ensuring it lines up with the Chocobo Knights cutscene, you can walk to the next screen, saving about 40 seconds. All of these combined saved several minutes, and contributed heavily to the progression of FF10 speedrunning. However, 8.5 years later in 2023, one of the holy grails of FF10 skips was found and made viable in real time. Known as Tera Skip, you can let an NPC push you through the far end of the area where you'd normally do Classco Skip. Normally, the path to the beach is blocked until right after the fight with Sinspon Gui, but by having an NPC push you through an invisible wall, you can access it much earlier than intended, skipping the entirety of Mushroom Rock and saving nearly 20 minutes. This was the major time save that would push the game well into the 9-hour range, causing a multitude of records. By the end of 2023, a runner named Oddmog had taken the 80% record down to 9 hours, 38 minutes, and 19 seconds. The run at this point came down to getting a decent seed, nailing all the skips, and getting good luck in parts of the game you couldn't manipulate. But at this point, even though there was still room for improvement on the PS2 version, more runners were getting interested in the cutscene remover mod and doing runs of that. This is completely understandable, given that it turns FF10 into a run that only lasts a few hours or so. However, just a few months ago, Karakarn would start getting back into the run, practicing while using the new Mushroom Rock Road skip. His first run back would land him a 9:47 on August 17th of 2024, and 8 days later, he'd get a 9:39, just a minute behind Oddmog's record at the time. Now remember, this was around the 20 minutes of time save expected from Mushroom Rock Road skip, so what would it take to push the time down further? Besides a little bit of cleanup on some missed skips, the seed you end up with when starting a run on PS2 will likely be different each time you do an attempt. This is important as some seeds are better than others. At this point, runners are not only tracking encounters, they're tracking ambushes, when you can steal an item, and many other aspects of the run. One seed can have some bad encounters early on, but may ease up as you get closer to the no encounters drop later in the run, and some seeds do the opposite. You're already resetting to get a ghost encounter that has a drop, all without getting too many extra encounters. To keep pushing the record down, so much more has to come together. As we already know, it wouldn't take Karakarn long to do just that, and a few weeks later on September 2nd, he got a run clocking in at 9 hours, 37 minutes, and 2 seconds. Much of the time variance here still comes from the random encounters that are not ambushes or preemptives, meaning it's possible for an enemy to go first and cause issues with running away. Titus usually uses Flee at the beginning of each random fight, so if he's out of commission before he gets a chance to use Flee, things get a little hairy. There's also some variance if there's a lightning strike weapon dropped early on, assisting with the Machina boss fights and making them much faster than usual due to increased damage output. So even though there is manipulation, that will only take you so far, especially with a seed that may be inferior to another. Karakarn's 9 hour, 34 minute, and 30 second record that he set on October 5th was likely carried by his seed, as he not only missed the Mihian skip in his run, but he got a 3 cycle MRR skip, losing a ton of time against what was possible. Karakarn's run did stay ahead of his last personal best all throughout, and he made up a ton of time in the late game. For example, he got friend spheres from Buran and Yenkei's fight on Mount Gagazet, letting him get additional strength on Yuna before Seymour Flux. This allows Bahamut to one-shot him and end the fight much faster than without it. It's things like this that brought the run back and made it as good as it was in the end. Still, there's plenty of room for improvement here, with some people even saying the run can get close to a sub 930 with current strategies. There is one more thing for sure that could bring this run under 9 hours and 30 minutes if it were discovered, and it goes back to a trick that was found out a long time ago. Someone could find a consistent method to get Jose skip, saving time similar to what MRR skip saves. This was actually found back in 2013, but from my understanding, it is a one-shot trick, meaning if you fail it, you don't get another chance at it. If someone were to pull this off in a run, it may be the final nail in the coffin for the 80% category. Congrats again to Karakarn for his achievement, and if you want to go check out his run, I linked it and his channel in the description. Stay hydrated folks, and thank you so much for watching.